Hi, guys. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to give a massive shout out to the incredible and talented team at Wear That Now, especially my girl, Christelle, for dressing me today and has been dressing me for all of these episodes. She's amazing. If you're anything like me and you've got occasions through the year, going shopping is probably the most stressful experience, especially when kids are around. You spend hours in the mall parking trying to find a spot. Then you're dragging kids around from shop to shop. You're probably going to be bribing them with sugary sweets just to try on that one outfit. Well, it's a thing of the past because Wear That Now has got your back. What they do is they team you up with your own personal stylist who curates a box to fit every occasion, every budget, and every style. That box will then be dropped off at your doorstep for you to try on the clothes in the comfort of your own home. The items that you love, you keep, and the ones that you don't, you simply send back. It's as easy as that. So if you're like me, you want to look good, but you've got zero time to do that in, go and check out Wear That Now on their Instagram page, which is wear.that.now, or on their website, which is wearthat.me. Check out their services, get some amazing outfits, take some photos, and DM me. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of They Say It Takes a Village. Sitting across the table from me today, I've got a woman who I, in my opinion, think is the true detective, a hormone detective, if you will. Sandra Sharpe is a functional medicine nutrition practitioner who specializes in restoring hormone imbalances and optimizing fertility and getting to the root cause in a woman's life. And she's here with me to talk about that specifically. What are hormone imbalances? Why do we get irregular cycles and everything in between? So without further ado, Sandra.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I feel we started the conversation with you joining It Takes a Village when you were pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took us 6 months to actually record this. So I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I guess, do you want to give the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Or I gave a little bit of a background, but
yeah.
Just a little bit more about what you do, what you practice, and how long have you been living here in the UAE?
So I've been in the UAE a total of now 16 years. I lived 5 years in the 90s, and then I came back in 2010. And I am, like you said, a functional medicine and nutrition practitioner. And I work with women primarily who have hormone imbalances and are looking to boost their fertility, restore hormone balance. And we do that by using functional nutrition and really getting to the root cause of the problem. Because hormone imbalances are really just a sign that there's something deeper going on in your body. So that is what I do. I've been doing it for about 6 years in total, coaching women. But 3 years ago, I really sort of niched down into the hormone world and the fertility world, mostly because of my own experiences becoming a mother and with my own health struggles that I've gone through over the last almost 2 decades. So my journey started a very long time ago, and it wasn't something that I planned to get into, but it was definitely destined, I think, because of what I've been through.
Do you know, I find a lot of the times you sit across the table from people and there's always a shift when they want to correct something that's going on in their life.
Yeah.
And then they become engrossed in it, and that becomes your life passion. So
100%.
It's so funny that you said that, because the majority of people who literally sit in your chair have said that. It starts with you, and then you're on this like quest to try to figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had a lot of my own troubles, and I think the biggest reason was not really getting the answers that I wanted. So for me, creating something and supporting women in a way where they felt more empowered about their health was a purpose for me to continue doing the work that I do.
That's brilliant. And do you see women in different phases of their life? I mean, in terms of age range?
So most of my clients and the women that I work with are sort of between the age of the early 20s or sort of mid 20s until about mid 40s.
Okay.
So I primarily work with women in their reproductive years. And then, menopause, I obviously know about menopause, but that's a whole other world.
It's a different episode.
It's a different beast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what we do and the work that we do is really between sort of the reproductive years that we focus on.
So obviously to get into it, I feel we all know what estrogen is. We hear the word progesterone, but we don't actually know.
Mhm.
You're taught the reproductive, I guess, system in
Yeah.
school, but no one really teaches you how to optimize it, how that impacts health. And the fact that it is really, honestly, I feel like it's building blocks to the health and well-being of your entire life.
Yeah.
So to set the record straight, can you explain to everyone who's listening what the roles or what are the female hormones that play a massive role in a woman's life?
Yeah. So I think the biggest two that we really need to focus on for a woman are estrogen and progesterone.
Yeah.
Obviously, women have a percentage of testosterone as well in their bodies, but the primary female hormones are estrogen and progesterone. And I think most of us know estrogen, obviously, because estrogen is what makes us women. It's what gives us curves. It's what gives us our features and our hair and our skin and all of that stuff.
So we like that.
We like estrogen, but estrogen is a very powerful hormone. So it is one that definitely needs to get balanced. And the hormone that balances it is progesterone. And progesterone is that really unsung hero in a woman's hormones. It's the keep calm hormone. It is pro-metabolic. It enhances sleep. It's obviously progestation. So it is the hormone that helps us have a pregnancy, get pregnant, and keep and maintain a healthy pregnancy. It is also pro-thyroid. It's pro-metabolic. It helps with your hair health and your skin health and your brain health and your heart health.
Oh, wow.
So it is really one of those incredible hormones that we really need to optimize. And I think all our lives we've grown up understanding and knowing what estrogen is.
That's true.
And knowing that progesterone is only something we worry about when we want to get pregnant.
That's very true.
But it's not full. It's not a complete information saying that we just only focus on progesterone when we want to get pregnant, because it is a hormone that we need for overall health. And if we want to make sure that we don't see symptoms of what we call estrogen dominance or higher levels of estrogen in relation to our progesterone, then we really need to make sure we optimize progesterone and really focus on nourishing it. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but there's a lot of reasons why progesterone gets depleted and why estrogen.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, why estrogen. Yeah. So those are the two primary hormones. And I think when we talk about women's health, that's sort of what we want to focus on.
And again, I find my next question is quite basic, but I feel like it needs to be said. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are fluctuations within a woman who's entering her reproductive years, which I believe is anywhere between 13, 14, something like that.
Yeah, on average.
On average, until takes you to menopause.
Yeah.
So during these fluctuations, these hormones, they go up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as a woman who's had 2 children, I still find it a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
So can we go through it?
Sure.
So a cycle.
Yeah. So a cycle is basically broken down into 4 phases. So, it's actually 3 phases. There's the follicular phase, the ovulation, and the menstruation. Follicular is broken up into 2 phases, and that is your pre-ovulatory and what we call the follicular, which is right after your menstruation. So menstruating and non-menstruating.
So you start, sorry, again, I'm going to throw another. So as I know, it's a 28-day cycle.
So on average,
it's 28 days.
Well, 28 days is sort of like the ideal.
The textbook one.
The textbook range or length of your cycle. But it's very rare to find a woman who is bang on 28 days regularly. So I would say anywhere between 25 and 32 days is sort of the average length of a cycle, a healthy cycle. And so, like I said, we start with the follicular phase, and there's the menstruation is part of that. And then there is the non-menstruating follicular phase. Yeah. So once you get your period, basically, that is day 1 of your cycle.
Okay.
So day 1 of your cycle is the first day of your flow.
Okay.
And then after you are finished with your period, then it is the follicular phase. And what happens is during our period, obviously, your estrogen and your progesterone plummet. So that is the lowest point of your hormones. That's why we obviously feel tired and depleted. It's when our uterine lining sheds because of that progesterone. And that is obviously when we're not getting pregnant, right? So progesterone sheds that uterine lining, and that's what becomes our period. After that, we have the follicular phase, where we have two hormones, which are FSH and LH, that are going to start showing up. So basically, FSH and LH are what prep your follicles, and which are going to be then fertilized potentially. And LH is what triggers your ovulation. So FSH is your follicular stimulating hormone, and your LH is your luteinizing hormone. So those two are obviously at play in the beginning of the follicular phase after you've finished your menstruation. So what happens is those start to rise, and along with estrogen, which is low at the bottom of so think of it as like a gradual increase. So your estrogen gradually starts to rise, and LH starts to rise, and then your ovulation is where you are at your peak levels of estrogen. So that is where your ovulation is triggered, and you obviously release an egg. That egg potentially gets fertilized, or it doesn't, right? So once you have hit your ovulation, your estrogen is meant to gradually sort of decline, and then your progesterone starts to rise. And progesterone rises only after ovulation. That is the only way that we can produce progesterone, is through ovulation and by ovulation, because there is an organ that actually our bodies create called the corpus luteum, which is actually an emptied egg sac.
That's an organ?
It's an organ. So it actually, your body creates an organ, and that is what later on becomes your placenta if you get pregnant. And if you aren't pregnant, your body basically reabsorbs the corpus luteum, and every month it creates it again. So it is probably one of the most fascinating things that
I was like, the waste products, like the little capsule that, the egg came out of, and it just goes away.
No, it's actually a very, very important organ. And it's something that is very nutrient dependent, very energy dependent. So it requires a lot of nutrients. It requires a lot of nourishing your body for that progesterone to be optimized and for it to flourish. So your progesterone then peaks, and you either get pregnant, so your progesterone will then continue remaining high, or you don't get pregnant, and then both your estrogen and your progesterone start to decline, and obviously the lowest point is your period, and that happens every cycle. Your estrogen levels slightly peak right before your period. They kind of slightly go back up, but they're supposed to be sort of on a lower level than your progesterone that whole second half of the cycle. And in women who have fertility struggles, in women who have a lot of PMS symptoms, really painful periods, very moody, outbursts during PMS.
I'm a bit moody.
Yeah, I think all of us are. Yeah. That is a true sign of sometimes imbalanced estrogen in relation to your progesterone. So if your estrogen levels do not properly decline, or they're not properly eliminated in your body, then in relation to your progesterone, it might be higher. And that's where we start to see symptoms of all the things that I've just mentioned. And essentially that can show up in many ways, in many symptoms, when we have that estrogen dominance in our bodies.
That is actually really fascinating. Again, as a 38-year-old woman, again, you study it science-wise, but not in relation to, the peak and the drop and all of that kind of stuff. And you are told, there are variations. Are there variations from month to month in terms of, for example, your ability to sort of rise and fall in terms of progesterone and estrogen? Or is it, if you are potentially balanced, it should be the same every month?
So ideally it should be consistent, but obviously with our lifestyles, with stress factors, with our diet, with all of that stuff, there can be slight variations, and that's normal for there to be slight variations. But if you're starting to see a pattern where you don't recognize your symptoms or something is sort of out of whack, that's where we need to start looking into.
Do you find that there's been a rise in irregularities in people's
100%.
cycles? Why?
I think the sort of top line answer to that is just the modern day woman and how she lives her life. Modern day women are probably the most stressed of any generation. And the reason for that is obviously we wear multiple hats. We are working, we're raising kids, we are taking care of households, we are trying to take care of ourselves. There's a lot of things going on in the world. There's social media, there's diet, trends and social pressures. And I think it's just constant ongoing stressors that are really affecting women's health. And we are the most vulnerable. Our bodies are the most vulnerable when it comes to these things because our bodies are naturally made for reproduction. And so whether you want children or not, your body biologically as a woman needs to feel safe. And I think with all the modern day stressors, whether that's internal or external, it's really affecting our hormones and it's really affecting that safety in our bodies. So we're starting to see all kinds of irregularities, not to mention like the decades of misinformation that we've gotten, the decades of diet trends that women have followed we're now seeing the effects of that now. Things like birth control, things like, whatever diet trends, low carb, low fat, all of these things that women have been led to believe are better for their health have completely destroyed our hormone balance. And we're starting to see the side effects of that now.
That's a bit scary.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is scary because I think women have over the years that innate power that we have, that divine power of being a woman and like the female power that we have has really been taken away from us. And I think fertility has been over medicalized. Our cycle has been over medicalized. Everything that we go to a doctor for is primarily, the pill is like the first thing that we get prescribed.
It's a Band-Aid solution, really quick fix.
It's Band-Aid solutions. It's also, reproductive. The women in their reproductive years are really not included in any sort of nutrition studies, in fitness studies. So we are left out, like decades of our lives are left out of research. And so anything that comes out, whether it's a new diet trend or a new fitness trend or whatever, women think that can apply to them with no repercussions. But in actuality, those things are tested primarily on men and post-menopausal women. So
it doesn't make any sense at all.
So when we're not told that unless you really look into it. So we're seeing just generations of women coming out with all kinds of imbalances. We're seeing girls now who are getting their periods at the age of 8 and 7.
Oh my goodness.
So there is definitely a knockoff effect of what we've been doing for years and how women have sort of taken care of themselves or been led to believe they're taking care of themselves, when in actuality, we've just been harming our bodies in multiple ways.
That's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's really like a massive shift of perspective that I think women need to go through.
But it's to be honest, I feel like it's good that you've got people such as yourself sort of put in place to kind of raise that awareness so that you're not going down another potential generation of bad habits or misinformation or, whatever it might be that could be impacting their hormones and therefore fertility down the line.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are, we are talking about hormone imbalances, but what are they? I mean, when you talk about it, is it just imbalances with estrogen or imbalances with progesterone? What are hormonal imbalances when it comes to that type of, in a woman's life?
Yeah. So hormone imbalances are just basically an imbalance in the level of hormones or the way that we produce hormones or the way that the way those hormones are sort of metabolized or not eliminated from our bodies. So they create imbalances. So many things in our lives can create imbalances, but it's not primarily estrogen and progesterone. Your sex hormones, which are your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are usually like the last things that we see get imbalanced. So when we see issues with your cycle, when we see issues with fertility, you really need to work your way back up. So look at everything literally all the way back up to your mental health, all the way back up to your stress,
So
your brain.
detective.
Yeah, exactly. Be a detective. So you need to start looking into your symptoms. You need to start asking why these things are happening. You need to take inventory of what's happening in your life, from a diet and lifestyle perspective, from a stress perspective. And then start looking into like, okay, how's my thyroid doing? How is my blood sugar balance? How is my stress? Because all of these things, as you work your way back up, you start to see all these things that are root causes to what creates imbalances in our sex hormones.
So they're almost like the receiving end of something that could have potentially happened.
100%. Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So it never really starts with a estrogen progesterone imbalance. There's always something you need to look into.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Because the majority of the time it's almost like an isolated thing.
No, it's not.
And people would think, oh, I've got an imbalance in X hormone and that's what I need to look into, and then potentially go down and see a doctor. Not that doctors are bad.
No.
But go down and get something to raise that or balance this, where they haven't potentially addressed what could have caused it.
Exactly. And that's the problem with spot treating hormones. You can't spot treat hormones. It's not the hormone that's the problem. It's everything else. So you need to fix everything else to fix the hormone, if that makes sense.
And then can I ask, so common symptoms? I find that could be quite broad.
Yeah.
Are there, I know that sounds like a silly question, but is there common symptoms for an estrogen imbalance? Are there common symptoms for a progesterone? Are there common symptoms for a thyroid?
Yeah.
How do you kind of piece the puzzle together?
There are definitely characteristic symptoms for each imbalance, but I think I can talk about the specific imbalances, and I can talk about in broad generality how to sort of establish that you have a hormone imbalance. So I think in general, the most common symptoms would be, any sort of sluggishness. If you're having issues with your energy, if you wake up tired, you're having trouble sleeping, if you have a lot of cravings. So whether, that's sugar or carbs, or you can't get through the day without multiple cups of coffee. So sugar and caffeine cravings are very telling of an imbalance. So that could be a blood sugar imbalance. It could be high stress levels. You could also have things like acne. You could have things like cold hands and feet, which would be a thyroid issue. Slower metabolism. If you see, for example, sudden weight gain or sudden weight loss, that could also be an issue. If you're starting to see a pattern in several cycles in a row where you see irregularities in the length, in the duration, in spotting, in certain symptoms that you're seeing, extreme moodiness, all of these things, you have to kind of piece the puzzle pieces together. So those are very common symptoms. When you start to look into things like particularly estrogen and progesterone, so high estrogen symptoms or low progesterone symptoms would look like PMS and PMDD, which are probably the most telling. Any sort of fertility struggles, chronic miscarriages or multiple miscarriages, things like fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, these are all high estrogen symptoms. If you have clotting, if you have heavy periods, these are all high estrogen symptoms. If you have things like breast tenderness around your cycle or cystic breasts, these are low progesterone symptoms. Again, they're very similar because they're in relation to each other. So if you have low progesterone, you pretty much have higher estrogen in relation. And then, when we go years and years and years and years of not truly tackling higher estrogen levels, that could also lead to things like cancer. So estrogenic cancers. So your ovarian, your breast, uterine, and then even thyroid, which has now been classified an estrogenic cancer.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So obviously, people are probably listening and thinking, for me, you've like caught me at moodiness because I do. And I know exactly when I feel it coming. I'm not as patient. I'm definitely quick to react, whereas I can generally be on an even keel. But when I am approaching that sort of towards the end, of my cycle, I do feel it. So let's say I'm looking to figure out what's going on with my hormones. Is it one of those things that you go into a clinic and you do a blood test? like a blood panel, and then you get almost like a map of where you are hormonally.
Yeah. So what I would say is if it is something like a pattern that you're seeing, then yes.
Okay.
If it is just one isolated symptom, it depends, because if it's just one symptom, then I would argue, how much you need testing.
Mm-hmm.
If it is a collection of symptoms, and usually that's what happens.
Yeah.
So moodiness is usually accompanied with other things. But yes, there is a sort of standard blood test that I would always ask women to do, especially if they've not gotten tested in many years or many months. But when it comes to moodiness, when it comes to PMS, when it comes to low energy, fertility struggles, all of those are all quite connected.
Yeah.
And I would usually ask for things like a full thyroid panel, which is not something a conventional doctor would ask for. So a full thyroid panel would include your TSH, your T4, T3, and your antibodies, which is going to tell you whether you have Hashimoto's or not. Something like a blood sugar panel, so like your fasting glucose, fasting insulin. Things like, your vitamin D, which is very commonly low. And there's always like the optimal range that we want to strive for. And then there's the normal range, which conventional doctors will say is fine, but it's actually quite low. So vitamin D is something that we see very commonly with women who have low energy. Things like your iron, your ferritin, your liver profiles, a CBC, so your white blood count, and if there's potentially any indication of an infection somewhere happening in your body. Things like you can definitely test your hormones, so things like your testosterone, your prolactin, your FSH, your LH, your estradiol, which is your estrogen, and then your progesterone.
Okay.
Now, it's very important to understand that testing your hormones on specific times of your cycle is important.
Yeah. You can't just go in and
yeah. So everything that I've just listed, you can test at any time.
Yeah.
Your hormones, which are like your estradiol, your FSH, your LH, your prolactin, your testosterone, I would test in the beginning of your cycle. Okay. So day 3, ideally, of your period.
Yeah.
And then your progesterone, you can't test at any other time of the month except after you've ovulated. Because obviously we only produce progesterone after ovulation. So I would say 5 to 7 days post ovulation is when you would test your progesterone, or let's say like a week before you get your period.
Okay.
So you would test your progesterone levels then.
That's really actually very, very informative because again, I'm not a hormone expert, and I, it's not one of those things I naturally would just want to go and find out if everything is okay, because you do hear that you can potentially have imbalances and, to look further into it. But it's actually so funny that you said also your iron. Mm-hmm. I did have very low iron, and I got an iron infusion.
Yeah.
I did feel a bit better.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of, just sort of combing through and seeing what the potential causes are.
Yeah. I mean, and it could be anything. It could be medications you've taken. It could be previous, health issues. It could be a gut issue. It could be
anything.
Anything. Yeah. Lifestyle, diet.
And when I was doing a bit of research on today's episode, I was going through your amazing Instagram, which is filled with so many, honestly, like quite bite-sized, really packed full information. One of them really stood out for me, I think, especially in relation to today, was this chronic depletion of progesterone. Mm-hmm. And that it is something that is happening more and more often.
Yeah.
First of all, what is it?
Yeah.
I don't know why it sort of popped up, just because I feel you did mention that more women are facing this. Mm-hmm. So what is it, and why are we seeing this happen more often?
Yeah. So again, I think this goes back to the idea of stress. Stress is really paramount when we come to talking about hormone balance, especially when we talk about progesterone.
I feel like you combined my two questions together. My next one is about stress.
Yeah. So cortisol, which is your main stress hormone, is a top tier hormone, what we consider a top tier hormone. So anything that happens with chronic stress levels or chronically high levels or imbalanced levels of cortisol will affect, it's like a domino effect for everything else in your body. So stress and managing stress is really a foundation to hormone balance. And like I said, unfortunately, we are probably more stressed than ever. Not just from like our jobs and traffic going to school, but it's like, you know, we're not eating enough. We're not eating regularly. We're not eating enough protein. You know, nutritionally, we're stressed. Our gut health is all out of whack. You know, there's so many, we're surrounded by toxins and inundated with endocrine disruptors. And there's a lot going on. And it's a lot for our bodies to kind of keep up with.
Like this low level stress that you're not even aware of.
Exactly. It's just like chronic low level, acute stress, you know, and over the years, obviously that's affected our progesterone. Now, progesterone is very sensitive to stress. So cortisol and progesterone compete. And
is that why they say if you're really stressed out, you don't ovulate?
Yes.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
So stress can definitely deplete your progesterone, and cortisol and progesterone compete, and cortisol always wins.
Okay.
So you get that depleted progesterone, which will obviously mean that you're not going to ovulate properly,
and
or you are not
ovulating. Time to have a baby.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why they tell you it's not a good time, because your levels are probably depleted, which means that you might get a lot more miscarriages, or you might, you know, not get pregnant at all. So yeah, that's really one of the main reasons why we're seeing these levels of progesterone being so depleted. But also, we are inundated with a lot of things in our life that increase our estrogen in relation.
Okay.
So things like dietary, you know, inflammatory foods, things like processed soy, which increases our estrogen levels. You know, toxins in our products that we're using called xenoestrogens, which mimic estrogen in our bodies. So things like plastic is a huge offender to that. If you are having gut issues, which is like 95% of the people out there, they have digestive distress. And if you're not eliminating estrogen properly, then you are recirculating it back into the system. So that just adds more estrogen levels. So in relation, you're not only depleting your progesterone, but you're also increasing your estrogen through a lot of different factors. And so we get this constant imbalance. And that's why this term of estrogen dominance has become basically like, it's like an epidemic, you know, it's just everywhere. So,
okay. So for example, when you see clients, so you would sit down with them and you would go through basically a day in a life of what they do, and then sort of pick out what's going on and then potentially try to eliminate that and see if it has an impact.
Yeah. So basically, how I usually do it is that they fill out a very detailed intake form. And that's for me to know, like you said, a day in the life, but also previously what they've done. What health issues have they had? What medications have they been on? Have they been on birth control? All of these kinds of things. So it's really like doing this detective work and trying to piece all these puzzle pieces together, which is super important, because when you go see a doctor and you explain your symptoms, they're like, okay, well, here's your prescription for those symptoms. See you later. But what they don't ask you is like, okay, well, how's your stress? You know, what are you eating? Are you sleeping properly? Is your liver working properly? Are you constantly drinking alcohol? You know, all of these things that no one really addresses. And when I work with women and they, you know, I ask them these questions, it's almost like shocking for them that someone's asking them, you know,
a bit personal.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does this have? You know, why? But it's also a relief, because as much as we need conventional doctors and they are lifesavers, it's lacking a big part of doing that detective work and understanding that there are reasons why we see imbalances. And I think that's pretty much what brought me into this work, was constantly asking, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Why am I just being given medication? Like, why is my body not functioning? And the doctors could never answer me. They just told me that my body, this is how it is.
What were you feeling?
Well, I had all kinds of symptoms. I mean, I had all kinds of issues. So I got diagnosed with a very, very bad case of hypothyroidism. Like, my body was literally shutting down at the age of 16.
Oh, wow.
And I was put directly on medication for life. So they told me, you have no other option but to be on medication for the rest of your life. And to hear that at the age of 16,
it's a lot.
It's like, what?
Yeah, that's a lot.
I didn't even know what a thyroid was.
Yeah,
so,
I wouldn't have either.
So, and back then nobody knew why a thyroid gets imbalanced to begin with. Now we have so much information. But back then it was just like, here's your medication, see you later, check up every 3 months. And that was it. I had chronic migraines. I had debilitating migraines where I would literally be in tears. I couldn't see light. I couldn't hear anything. And this would happen multiple times a month. I had debilitating periods where I was out of commission for 2 to 3 days. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't go to work. I had, weight fluctuations, cravings, all kinds of, I had terrible skin, all kinds of things. And the constant question in my mind was like, why? Why is this happening? Yeah. It's not normal. It can't be normal. So I think that curiosity is what led me to do the work that I do today, because I realized that there was this huge gap of information. Like, we are owed this information. It's Absolutely. Our bodies. And none of us knew anything about it. So it really opened my eyes to like, wow, there is so much to learn that we have never been told.
No.
So yeah, I mean, doing the detective work is really important.
I mean, you look great. I mean, how are you feeling now?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, again, it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
It's something that I'm constantly learning to deal with. Obviously, I'm monitoring my thyroid. I just had my thyroid removed 3 years ago because I had cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like ongoing, up and down, and things that you're learning and things that are developing in your body. But I think what I always tell my clients is if you learn the foundations and if you learn how your body's meant to work, you'll be able to surpass all of that, because you'll understand what you need to do, what steps you need to take, along with any medical intervention that can help your overall health. So it's that body literacy that is super important.
Do you know, I find that body literacy, sometimes it's not as easy as you say it.
No,
we're not, I guess, I think we're a group of people or a community where it's almost like we forgot to listen. And, a lot of the things are kind of pushed away because they're inconvenient almost. Yep. You just want to go past it. You want a quick fix because you need to get on with something else.
Yeah.
So it's important to take a minute and really just reanalyze and reevaluate what's going on and to almost go back to, I don't want to say instinct, but to really just pause and listen to what is actually happening, which again, it's a lot easier said than done.
100%. Yeah. And I don't think that's necessarily our fault as women.
No.
Like I said, we grew up in a world where everything was medicalized. Everything was like to sell, diet plans, trends.
Absolutely. It's the fast.
It's the fast, the quick.
The instant gratification.
100%.
And these things are not fast.
No.
They happen over a gradual,
exactly,
period of time. And you can't rush your health, but also you've also got the rest of your life. So why are you in a rush?
Yeah.
But I mean, I fall victim to that all the time.
Oh,
I do want, the quick thing. And I sometimes, especially now, you add an extra layer of being a mother. I struggle with this all the time, that I feel like I'm always sort of the bottom rung of the totem pole.
Yeah.
When it shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
You should resurface a little bit, reprioritize, because if there is something wrong with me and I am not dealing with it now properly, that it's just going to rear its ugly head, so 10 years down the line. Exactly. And that's not going to serve anybody, really.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I think it's something that you have to recalibrate your life, but your mindset as well.
100%. Mindset is huge. And I think a lot of it is like unlearning what we've been programmed to think and believe and know about how our bodies are, how they are meant to look, how they're meant to function, how they're meant to be. And again,
there's a vanity aspect.
Yeah,
to it,
there is the vanity. And it's also, we've been told that we have no control over anything that happens to us as women. Pain and discomfort are a default because you're a woman. You suffer because you're a woman. You need to look a certain way because you're a woman, and there's this aspect of like, wait a minute, like, who are you to tell me what I need to do and need to look like?
Usually it's a man.
Exactly.
A man
so it's a
probably
patriarchal thing that we've had to sort of deal with for years and decades. And I think that's why I always say there's this like great awakening of female health and women's health, and women are finally starting to realize, this is my body. I'm intuitively leaning into what I need to lean in. You know, I can't work 9 to 5 and then go raise kids and then do everything go, 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 because it's ruined our hormone health.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
it's
a man's world. It's a man's world. And it has been like that. And, you know, we've just kind of fallen victim because obviously our bodies, like I said, are very, very sensitive to it. And we've not been able to kind of lean into that feminine energy and understand that no, where a man's hormones fluctuate every 24 hours and it's the same like clockwork every single day, we are on a whole roller coaster of everything for 28 days on average. So we have to have days, and we're going to have days where we feel absolutely on top of the world, and we're going to have days where we feel like absolute garbage, and it's totally normal.
It's totally normal. And to be honest, should be nurtured.
Exactly. Which is what I'm saying hasn't been nurtured.
It hasn't.
And we've been constantly told that it's wrong to feel that way. Or we're failing, or we're lazy.
It's almost like just get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. Suck it up and move on.
Suck it up. Just get on with it. This has been happening since the dawn of day.
Yeah.
So what makes you, why are you, but I mean, now we're seeing chronic progesterone depletion.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting thyroid issues. You know, you've got these imbalances. These are signs to stop. And reevaluate.
Reevaluate. Exactly. 100%. So yeah, I mean, we're on, like, we've kind of broken that barrier, and women are really starting to wake up and realize that. And I think also society in general, I mean, there's corporations now that are like really catering to women's health needs. There's countries that are giving like menstrual leave, which is amazing. So yeah, I mean, we're getting there.
We're getting there. Slowly but surely. It's happening.
There,
and that's it. It's just the realization. But, you know, conversations like these, you know, that type of awareness that there's no need to just grin and bear it.
Yeah.
Feel it. And that's okay.
Exactly.
You know? I do have to ask you, because obviously you are kind of steeped in functional nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So diet and exercise, I feel like everybody always wants to operate at their optimal, and diet and exercise, I mean, they potentially go hand in hand. Now, again, you've touched on, you know, the fads and the you know, the trends at the moment, you know, keto and low carb and high, I don't know what, you know, whatever it might be. And then the exercises that come and go, whether it's Pilates, yoga, then the high intensity ones, and then the spin. There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
Let's say we're focusing on a lens of optimal hormone stability.
Mm-hmm.
What is ideal when it comes to exercise? And what is ideal when it comes to nutrition? Of course, high level.
Yeah.
But for a modern woman who has potentially a job and is raising a family.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
So no, I mean, this is what I work with every day. So, and I'm obviously I'm
just for somebody like you.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to exercise, I think my biggest recommendation is women need to build muscle.
Okay.
That is hands down the most important thing.
Okay.
We don't need to look like the Hulk, and we won't look like the Hulk.
I don't want to be bulky. But you're not going to.
You can't be bulky ever. We don't have enough testosterone for that. So, but it is extremely important to build muscle. Why? Because muscle is the organ of longevity. It is what is going to keep us looking younger, making us feel healthier. It's going to balance our blood sugar, because muscle is a glucose dumping ground. So it helps balance and regulate our blood sugar levels. It helps burn fat. So the more muscle you build, the less fat percentage you have in your body.
Okay.
You know, it helps obviously aesthetically, it helps with your posture, it helps with bone density, and your joint health, which obviously as we move into menopause, those things start to decline. And we see a lot of women who didn't train, you know, like my mother, for example, who got osteoporosis. So it's really important to make sure that we optimize and we prioritize building muscle. So strength training for me is hands down the best thing for women to do.
So like Pilates.
Yeah.
You know, so the reformer.
Yeah. That is strength. That's still strength training. Okay. So I would say whether that's lifting weights, whether that is Pilates reformer, those are all great. You know, if you like yoga, that's fine. Where I would start to put an asterisk is high intensity training.
Okay.
And
I tend to like that. I think mentally I like it.
There are times where it's good, and there are times where I would say
Don't do it.
Drop it.
In your cycle, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Can you go through that?
Yes.
Okay.
So high intensity is good. Like it's okay for you to do. I just think where women are already stressed. Okay. So number one is evaluate where your stress levels are, because women who are chronically stressed and then go do a CrossFit class or a spinning class to de-stress, it's actually raising your cortisol levels even higher.
Okay.
So you need to evaluate where your stress levels are, because if your cortisol levels continue to elevate, you're going to be in a catabolic state, which means it's going to break down muscle. It's going to basically, your body goes into a breakdown mode. So we don't want that.
No.
So first, evaluate your stress levels.
Okay.
If it's something that you really feel is great, yes, it releases endorphins. It's going to make you feel good. I would opt to do it in the first half of your cycle.
So the follicular.
The follicular.
I'm
phase.
learning.
Yes, there you go. So in your follicular phase.
Okay.
Why? Because you are more resilient to that stress. Whereas in the second half of your cycle, I would drop it. Personally, just because you need to do more low impact stuff. Strength training is great throughout because you can make it more intense. You can drop the weights and make it lower impact. It's very versatile. But where it comes to high intensity is where I would be careful, again, because of those stress levels. And we want to tame the stress levels, because even with overtraining, you can, impact your gut lining, you can impact your hormone balance, you can impact your sleep.
It's good to know.
There's a lot at play when our stressors and stress, like I said, it's not just your job. It's also like training. It's also under eating, which is 95% of the women out there are overtraining and under eating. So it's just stressor after stressor after stressor, and you're already stressed. So it's just like your body breaks down. So we want to avoid that.
Okay.
So that's for exercise.
Yeah.
When it comes to nutrition, sort of rules of thumb, I would say ditch the processed foods as much as you can.
So that's like, your turkey deli meat, and that's, your, I don't know. I mean, what other things are kind of...
Yeah, well, I think the most, so turkey deli meats and things like that are okay if you're able to source good quality from them. So like sodium nitrate, without the preservatives and all the
preservatives,
stuff. And there are options out there. I wouldn't completely cut those out, because for some people, that's something that they enjoy having. But I would say that the things that I would really focus on eliminating are refined sugars, refined carbohydrates, highly processed foods that have like 20, 30 ingredients that you can't even pronounce. You don't want to put that into your body. Inflammatory seed oils. So things like rapeseed oil, canola oil, all these like processed seed oils are extremely inflammatory to the body.
I didn't know grapeseed was one.
Yeah.
We've switched from that to avocado oil.
Yeah. So I would say avocado, olive oil, and coconut oil are your three best oils. Then I would do like ghee or grass-fed butter, things like that, lard, tallow, all of those.
Good to know.
But the canolas and all those sunflower oils, I would just drop those. And then packaged foods. So like I said, all the ultra processed packaged stuff. I highly
have like really long shelf life, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So opt for whole foods, balance, a lot of color. And I think the main thing for hormone balance is making sure that you are eating adequate amounts of protein. So 30 to 40, it's a good place to start is 25 to 40 grams of protein.
Okay.
Macro content of food in your meals. 3 to 4 times a day.
Okay.
And then you want to make sure that you're having enough fats in your healthy fats in your meals, and complex carbohydrates for fiber.
Okay.
The reason why is obviously each one of those serve a purpose. So if you're eating low fats, you're not making enough cholesterol, you're not going to be producing enough hormones. If you are eating low protein, same with that, you're also not going to be sustaining muscle mass, which is obviously what we said is really important for longevity and blood sugar balance and all of that.
Okay.
And then fiber is essential for your digestive health, for eliminating toxins, for bowel movements. So each one has a purpose. So if they've told you low carb, low fat,
don't fall
for it. And then the last thing I would say is like, if you're choosing, and this is controversial as always, but if you are choosing to be vegan,
okay,
for non-religious, non-ethical purposes, and you think that it's better for the world, I would urge you to reevaluate that.
Really?
Because we're seeing a trend of women who have gone vegan and have all kinds of issues with their cycles, with their fertility. And the minute they start adding animal protein back in, it's all gone.
Wow, that's
amazing. So yeah, unless it's for religious purposes, I would say, maybe
have a rethink. Rethink of what's going on. Yeah, because I mean, you hear that, it's animal products are not so good. Go plant-based. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, just go back to the basics. And I think that's the most,
hunter-gatherer.
Yeah, we have all these different food options for a reason. They all serve a purpose.
Yeah.
So why do we need to cut out whole food groups? Unless, of course, it is for medical or religious purposes. The only thing I would say is if your body is functioning perfectly fine and you're a vegan and you have absolutely no issues, then
go for it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But 98% of the women that I speak to, that doesn't work. So
it's time to reevaluate.
Yeah.
But I think reevaluating, don't you find that you have to reevaluate at every stage of your life?
Oh, 100%.
So you could try something for a while. That doesn't work. You can try something else. Then you find something that could work for a short period of time and that stops working. And then it's a constant thing.
Yeah. But the thing is, and this is why, if you go back to foundations and back to basics, you don't have to reevaluate much.
That's right.
It's consistent and it's sustainable. And that's exactly what I teach my clients is that what you learn in my programs, you can take it and run for the rest of your life. Every stage of evolution that you go through as a woman, you can apply that and it will work. So I want to take women away from these fads and confusing information that is constantly there.
It's good. I feel like we are sort of setting the record straight here. This is going to be, again, a high level question because you've got polycystic ovaries, thyroid disorders, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. These are things that often come about. And then do they have a knock-on effect on your hormones? Or is it that you've got hormone imbalances and then that is the cause or the effect?
If you're talking about PCOS, thyroid, insulin resistance, and diabetes. So a major root cause of all of those is blood sugar imbalance.
Okay.
So, and digestive health. So I would say those two things you would have to, blood sugar balance is huge for hormone health. You have to balance your blood sugar. If not, insulin is a top tier hormone. And when cortisol goes up, insulin goes up. So we need to make sure that we are balancing our blood sugar and stress management. Those two are the top tier pillars for hormone balance.
And when you say balancing our blood sugar, so is that basically the food that you're eating or at the times that you're eating or giving space between meals?
Yeah.
I feel, again, I'm not really sure what you mean because it is a bit confusing.
Yeah.
You do want to get that, blood sugar balance, but how do you go about doing that?
So there's several ways. So obviously the type of food that you're eating. Yeah. So if you're eating really high refined sugars and carbs, that can obviously spike your blood sugar. If you are, for example, not eating breakfast and you're fasting very long hours, your cortisol goes up in the morning and you're having, let's say, a cup of coffee in the morning and that's all you're having. That's going to shoot your cortisol up.
Which is the stress hormone.
Which is the stress hormone. Yeah. And in the mornings, that is usually the highest. It's at the peak in the morning. Okay. That's what wakes us up.
Yeah.
So you're basically just pushing those levels even higher. And as soon as cortisol goes up, blood sugar rises.
Oh my gosh.
So, and the reason for that is basically a survival mechanism. Yeah. So when we are stressed, your blood sugar rises so that it gives you energy.
That's right.
To kind of basically sustain the stress levels.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we are eating in the mornings, not intermittent fasting for hours and hours.
That's blows my mind because you've got this massive thing now with intermittent fasting.
Yeah. So when it comes to fasting, my rule of thumb is fasting is beneficial, but there's a caveat.
Okay.
So you need to make sure that if you are in your reproductive years, whether or not you're trying to have children, you're still in your reproductive years. Fertility still has to function properly.
It's almost like that's the priority.
Exactly. Yeah. So you need to keep your body safe. If you are fasting extremely long hours,
So let's say like past 14 hours.
Yes.
Okay.
So your stress levels go up. Again, it's a survival mechanism. So your body doesn't know the difference between fasting and famine. It doesn't know when you're getting food.
Food's not there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, to keep it in sort of a safe range, I would say anywhere between 12 and 14 hours is a safe bet.
Okay.
Anything more than that, you can do if there is a medical reason that warrants it. Okay. So for example, you have insane inflammation in your digestive system, you've got a gut infection, you're trying to tame inflammation in your gut, for example, or if there's anything else that you need to kind of tame.
Keep at bay.
Yeah. Then you can do longer periods of fasting under supervision because it should only be temporary. And it should only be for short blocks of time at specific times in your cycle. So not when you're ovulating.
Yeah.
And not when you're menstruating, because obviously that's going to just wreak havoc on your reproductive system and cycle. So there is a caveat to fasting, and there's always context. Yeah. So we need to understand context. We can't just say fasting is great 18 hours for everybody. So that's not the case. It's great for men. They have absolute benefits from that. And it's great for postmenopausal women.
Oh, wow.
But anyone in their reproductive years, you have to remember that you need to keep your body safe. That is like the most important thing. So anything that throws off that safety is going to cause a cascade of issues down the line.
It's so interesting that you said that because I feel a lot of people will naturally take on intermittent fasting on their own accord.
Yeah.
And
we all did. I mean, I'll be the first to say
So fasting usually, people go into it just on their own accord and think, yep, I'm just going to do, and I'm going to throw in a 15, 16 hour fast.
Yeah.
But I think what you've said, I think it's really important to understand why you're fasting, number one. And unless it is medically advised or whatever it might be, you might want to look into how to do it so that you are reaping the benefits as opposed to adding more stress.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're fasting 12, and this is why I recommend 12 to 14 hours, because you're still getting the benefits of fasting. You're still giving your body a digestive break. You're still renewing cells and all of those things that we get from fasting. You are supporting weight loss, all of that stuff. But you don't need to do it to a point where it's like stressing your body even more, like you said. So I prefer to keep it in that safe range because everyone should fast. But you're basically fasting the majority of it anyways in your sleep because you're sleeping hopefully 7 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
So that's the majority of the time. And then the other few hours are sort of between your last meal and as you get up. And then there's ways to obviously, if you're someone who can't have a meal 60 minutes after waking up, there are ways to activate your digestive system and give your body something to hold on to and keep
until you can
eat a full meal.
Yeah.
But black coffee is not your answer.
It is the go-to first thing in the morning, but it's not going to sustain you.
Yeah. Well, it's also going to wreak havoc on your stress hormones. So there's ways to consume coffee in a way that is not going to do that.
What are those ways?
So ideally, you want to have something to eat with your coffee or after. So after you've eaten, you have your coffee. But like you said, a lot of women in the morning are like scrambling around.
Yeah.
So coffee is sort of their go-to. So my recommendation is to have a small snack with that includes some form of protein or fat.
Okay.
Which helps dull that blood sugar spike that's going to happen from a black coffee or just from a plain coffee. And then I would also add things like collagen protein, which again helps with that blood sugar balance.
Into the coffee.
I would use something like a whole fat creamer or raw milk. So A2 raw milk, which is better digested. You can also have coconut milk. So these are all fattier milks. You can also have MCT oil, to help with cognitive function. I would also add something like an adaptogen or functional mushroom powder like reishi, which helps with that nervous system regulation. So again, you're trying to mellow out the the effects of caffeine on your stress hormones and on your blood sugar balance.
I've been doing it all wrong. That's probably why I'm my moods are all
Exactly.
over the place.
So that's what happens. You start to crave things. You start to have that energy slump. You start to get really moody and irritable. So yeah, making those simple tweaks can make huge differences in your day. And then if you're like really struggling with severe hormonal imbalances or fertility issues, I would say drop the coffee temporarily. And then opt for things like matcha.
Yeah.
Or keep your coffee for the first half of your cycle and keep your matcha and more mellow forms of caffeine in the second half.
Yeah.
So there's many ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can sort of play around with it.
It depends. It depends.
But it's quite good because I feel like you are placing emphasis on the cycle. You know, operate within the cycle because your body tends to need specific things on that particular day and then a specific thing, you know, down the line, you know, 2 weeks later. So that's quite important. And I think that part is a good one.
Yeah.
And I never, to be honest, me, myself, I never pay attention. I don't even know what day of my cycle I am currently.
Yeah.
And that has never, in my whole life, I've never put emphasis on it.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because I should have.
Yeah. I mean, we all had, like, we all grew up with the same health education.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, we're slowly learning these things. And I think the most important thing, like, you don't have to worry about specific foods at specific times or specific training modalities at specific, like, every phase of the cycle needs a certain type of training. I don't agree with that. I think there's a baseline to everything. And there's also rules of thumb, like blood sugar balance, and stress and all of that you can kind of split between the first half and the second half. So
gut health.
Yeah.
Big one. Another full episode.
Yeah. I mean,
optimal gut health and hormones. Are they completely interlinked or so we need to definitely look into gut health if they will have a direct impact?
Yes.
Okay.
So your gut health has a direct impact in many ways. First of all, it regulates your estrogen. So it is a big component to estrogen balance in your system. Estrogen is regulated through a specific department of bacteria in your gut called the estrobolome. And it regulates the levels of estrogen levels. It is also the last stop where your estrogen gets eliminated out of your system. So if you have any sort of digestive distress, if you're constipated, if you have issues with your digestive system, you could actually recirculate estrogen back into your system, which I talked about earlier. And that recirculated form of estrogen is usually quite toxic. So over time, that causes other issues. It also is a place where your thyroid hormone gets converted. So your thyroid makes a hormone, which is your primary thyroid hormone, your T4. That T4 is a storage hormone. It's not actually used in the body. So what happens is that gets converted to the active form, which is T3.
Okay.
So that conversion happens primarily in the liver, but also in the gut. So if you have gut issues, it could affect your thyroid. It could also play a major role in autoimmune conditions, which it does. The common symptom that we see is leaky gut or intestinal permeability, and that can happen for multiple reasons, whether it's infections or dietary issues or lifestyle issues, medications, birth control, things like that. And that can cause inflammation in the body, that can wreak havoc on your hormones. So that intestinal permeability is something that is very common. And the last thing is like I said, the inflammation. So if you have any sort of parasites or dysbiosis or leaky gut or any of that, it can cause inflammation, which can affect your fertility. It can affect, inflammation is basically the root cause of 95% of chronic conditions out there. So we need to make sure that we are lowering inflammation and prioritizing that gut health.
When it comes to hormone imbalances and mental health, is there a clear connection?
Yeah. So any sort of imbalance, so whether we see high estrogen, low progesterone, low thyroid function, blood sugar imbalance, high cortisol.
Okay. So when it comes to mental health, what impact do hormones play on mental health? I mean, of course, I feel like that is a massive subject, just like everything we've touched on.
Yeah.
But do you find that you're seeing a lot of sort of the rise in mental health, and concurrently you're getting somebody that does have a potential hormonal imbalance?
Yeah, definitely. So we're seeing a lot of symptoms of depression, anxiety, brain fog, moodiness, very common in women. And I think I can't tell you how many women I've spoken to that told me they got prescribed antidepressants when it's just a hormonal imbalance that they need to look into. So yes, I mean, anything from low progesterone to high estrogen, high cortisol, blood sugar imbalance, low thyroid, gut health issues can all show up with mental health. There is a correlation. Yeah. So you can see, like I said, all these symptoms of depression, anxiety, overwhelm, panic, anxiety, brain fog, all of those are super common.
They are, and they're linked.
Yeah.
It's so funny because everyone's so quick to say antidepressants, here you go, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, you just have to keep asking why.
Yeah.
Like your body is meant to be in balance. So why is it
happening? And that's my next question. How can women, again, when you are faced with a healthcare professional, sometimes it's a bit intimidating. Sometimes you second guess your own intuition or your own ability to kind of read your body. So how can women, or what would you say to women listening to this that are wanting to advocate for themselves a bit more firmly with a healthcare provider? So
I would say the biggest thing is ask questions.
Yeah.
But first, understand your body. Know how your body is meant to work, what it does, how it's meant to feel. And then I would also, if you find a practitioner or a provider that doesn't support or isn't able to answer your questions or just gives you a prescription without really going into why these potentially might happen, then I would find another provider. So someone in holistic health, functional medicine, because remember, conventional doctors, we need them. They are life-saving, but they are there to treat disease. What we're trying to do is prevent disease. So they're not going to sit there and explain to you the lifestyle factors and health factors that you need to be doing on a daily basis to prevent disease. They're just going to treat your disease or tell you you're fine until you show the signs of disease. So we want to make sure that we learn how to prevent these things. And I would say, if you're unable to get those answers from a practitioner, find someone else who can help you.
I got you. That's it. Yeah. There's lots of people, get a second opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Feel, there is a point when you think, okay, I am comfortable with this. And there are very slight red flags that you think it's just not sitting well with me. Yeah. Sleep on it, look around, do the research. You are your own best advocate. Yeah.
But also you need to understand that 90% of what happens to your body is in your hands.
Yeah.
10% is genetics and genetic triggers. 90% of the control is within your hands. So there's a lot you can do before
it's a big reminder.
Before you have to go down the medication route. Not that medication is failure, but there's things to consider before that.
Yeah. And finally, in terms of advice, what should women, almost like your take home, what should women be doing proactively to try to avoid potential imbalances down the line?
So my biggest advice is, one, to stay curious about your body, about your health. Take inventory, like really listen to your body and learn to understand what it's trying to tell you. Your body's not failing. It is really just trying to survive. And we don't want to be in survival mode. We want to be thriving. So take inventory of what's going on. What is your body trying to tell you? There is nothing wrong with you. It's just you need to listen to what's happening and dig deeper and find people in your life who can help you dig deeper, whether that's a coach, whether that's a practitioner, whether that's, a healer, whatever it is. But do what you need to do and know that there are so many things that you can do on a daily basis. And if you need that support, there are so many people now that can support you in that to know these daily tweaks that we can make to better hormone health and better fertility.
On that note, how can people reach you?
So the best way to reach me is on Instagram at Sandra Sharpe wellness, just DM me, let me know that you have listened to me on this podcast. And yeah, my DMs are always open.
I'll obviously list all of your details in the show notes, on YouTube, on social media. And honestly, guys, check out Sandra's page because it is jam-packed with incredible, incredible advice. Just even having a look, if you're interested without, you don't know where to even start, definitely start on Sandra's page. It's incredible.
Thank you.
I do generally always link a quote to an episode. Mine for today was, balance is not something you find, it's something you create.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have one for us today?
Yeah. So mine is, a woman is I'm going to butcher this. Hold on. Mine is, a woman is the full circle. Within her is the power to create, nurture, and transform.
Oh, I absolutely love it. It is so fitting.
My favorite.
It's beautiful. Sandra, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible.
Thank you. It was
I feel a lot of people are going to, bring out like a pen and a paper and just take notes and then, potentially be knocking on your door.
Yeah. I'm always here. So happy to support in any way that I can.
Thank you for listening to They Say It Takes a Village. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I look forward to bringing you another one next week. Don't forget, please subscribe, rate, and review so I can reach and help even more parents. And if you've got a topic that you'd like me to cover, please head over to my Instagram page, ittakesavillage.me, and drop me a line.